I returned from vacation to find my fence missing. Not damaged, not partially knocked down. Gone like it had never existed. The screw holes in the posts were still there. Sawdust on the grass, my garden beds wide open to the street, and taped to the mailbox with cheap Scotch tape was a bright pink HOA violation slip. Unsigned, unstamped, and without any official documentation. I stared at it for a solid minute, trying to process. It was mid-July, 97 degrees. My luggage was still in the Uber, but all I could think was, what kind of person does this? If you've ever dealt with a neighborhood Karen, the kind who thinks every sidewalk crack is her jurisdiction, you already know where this is going. But let me tell you how bad it can really get when a bored suburban tyrant thinks she owns your property, and how one call to 911 flipped her whole empire upside down. Before I dive in, if you've ever had a neighbor who thought your fence, your yard, your life was somehow theirs to control, drop a comment below. Let's share some stories. And don't forget to like and subscribe. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. Now let's rewind. 3 weeks earlier, I'd left for Barcelona with my girlfriend. It was our first real vacation in 2 years. I'd triple locked the house, notified the mail service, even set my sprinklers on a timer. Everything was handled, except Karen. Her real name's Margaret Dillon, but nobody calls her that. Not even her husband. Around the neighborhood, she's simply Karen, the unchallenged queen of passive-aggressive power trips. She once tried to fine a teenager for putting a Halloween decoration up too early. Last Christmas, she reported another neighbor for excessive icicle lighting. When the HOA didn't act, she climbed a ladder herself and clipped the cords. And now, apparently, she'd taken it upon herself to demolish my fence. To be clear, the fence had been there when I bought the house. A clean, 6-foot cedar panel design. Fully compliant. No one had ever raised an issue until Karen knocked on my door 6 months ago. Binder in hand and fake smile in place. "I was just reviewing some of our older property records," she said, gesturing at the papers like a prosecutor in court. "And I noticed your fence is slightly out of date with current HOA aesthetics." "Aesthetics?" I asked. "Yes, the vertical paneling style was phased out years ago. Most of us updated. It creates a unified look, you know." I didn't argue. I thanked her for the info and said I'd look into it, which I did. The HOA documents hadn't been updated in 5 years, and there was nothing about panel style, just maximum height and setback distances. My fence met all of it. Still, she brought it up again and again. Once I caught her snapping pictures from my driveway, claiming she was just checking storm damage. So I wasn't surprised when, 5 days into the trip, I got a vague text from my next-door neighbor, Carla. "Hey, did you approve someone to work on your yard? Looks like something's happening with your fence." I texted back immediately, "Nope." "What do you mean happening?" She didn't reply until 2 hours later. "Some guys were taking it down. I thought maybe you hired them. A woman was there too, kind of directing them. Blonde bob, floral shirt." That was Karen's uniform. I FaceTimed her but got no answer. I called my security company, but the battery on the front cam had died 2 days prior and I hadn't seen the alert. I called a friend to swing by. He confirmed it. The fence was gone. He said it looked like someone had done a clean job, like it wasn't vandalism, more like a removal crew. That's when the dread started. Karen didn't just complain, she acted. And with her position on the HOA board, she liked to bend rules until they cracked. By the time I landed back in the US, I'd already drafted 3 emails, one to the HOA, one to a lawyer, and one to Karen herself. I didn't expect a reply. I got one anyway. She met me outside as I was hauling luggage in, arms crossed, sunglasses on despite the dusk. "Welcome back," she called, all fake cheer. "Hope you had a lovely trip. We took care of your fence while you were away." I stopped walking. "You took care of it?" "Well, yes, it was in violation. Unapproved design, and it was leaning slightly on the south side. Safety hazard. You removed it without my permission. We posted a warning. It's not my fault if you chose to ignore community compliance standards." I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I just looked her in the eye and said, "Did you personally remove it?" "I supervise," she said, smirking. That was enough. I walked inside, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911. The dispatcher asked me calmly what the emergency was. I explained, still trying to keep my voice steady, that a neighbor had entered my property without permission and removed a full perimeter fence while I was out of the country. She asked if I had proof. I said, not yet, but I know who did it, and I know it wasn't legal. An officer arrived within 20 minutes. Officer Malone, late 30s, buzz cut, calm eyes. He stepped out of the cruiser like he'd seen this kind of suburban insanity before. Afternoon, he said, glancing around my property. You said your fence was stolen? Yes, I replied. It was here when I left. Now it's not. And my neighbor over there, I pointed toward Karen's house, just admitted she supervised the removal. He gave me a look. Not skeptical, just careful. Did you hire anyone to take it down? Any contractors, landscapers? No. Any official notice from the HOA? There was a pink slip taped to my mailbox. No signature, no stamp, no letterhead. We walked around the yard. I showed him the marks in the soil, the clean cuts on the posts. Whoever removed it knew what they were doing. The nails weren't yanked. They were cleanly unscrewed. This wasn't vandalism, Malone said, crouching to inspect a post. This was disassembly. Exactly. He took my statement, then went to Karen's house. I watched from the kitchen window as she opened the door with her signature smile. She talked a lot, gestured with her hands. He took notes. She even laughed at one point. When he came back, his expression had changed. She says the HOA authorized the removal based on non-compliance, he said. Claims you were warned and failed to respond. She's lying. I believe you, he said, but I need something more concrete. Do you have security footage? Number the battery on my cam died 5 days ago. I didn't see the alert. That's unfortunate. Without video or documentation proving they had no right, it becomes a civil dispute, not criminal theft. Unless, he paused, unless we can prove she gave false information to a contractor. Did she hire someone? She said she supervised, claimed it was an HOA-approved removal. Okay, then here's what I'd suggest. Find out who actually did the work. If she hired them under false pretenses, claimed she owned the property or had authority, that's a different case. That's fraud. You get me that name, we'll have something. I nodded. He handed me a card. Call me directly if anything else comes up. The moment he drove off, I marched next door. She opened the door before I even knocked, like she'd been waiting. Was that really necessary? She asked, tilting her head. Calling the police over a compliance issue? You trespassed and stole my property. It wasn't theft. It was correction. You'll thank me when you see how much better the neighborhood looks. Who removed the fence? I'm not obligated to give you that information, she said, crossing her arms. I'll find out. She smirked. Good luck with that. Turns out I didn't need much luck. Carla, the neighbor who had texted me, had something better. A doorbell camera. One of those smart systems with cloud storage and wide-angle lenses. That night, over a cup of tea, she pulled up the footage on her tablet. The date stamp was clear. 2 men in navy polos hauling boards and panels into the back of a flatbed trailer. Karen in her floral blouse, arms folded, nodding as they worked. She never said a word about this being official, Carla said. She acted like she was doing you a favor. Do you know the company name? Yeah, she said. It was on the side of the truck. Westside Property Services. I remember because they did my cousin's deck last year. I nearly hugged her. Back home, I looked them up online. Small outfit, local. The number rang twice before a man picked up. West Side. Hi, my name's Jackson. I'm calling about a job you did 2 weeks ago. Removing a cedar fence on Maple Drive? There was a pause. Yeah? I'm the owner of that property. The woman who hired you. Did she say she owned the house? She said she was with the HOA. That the fence violated code and had to be removed immediately. Had papers and everything. Did you verify ownership? Look, we don't check deeds, man. She paid cash, handed us a printout with some HOA letterhead, and said it was an authorized order. We just did the job. Did you keep any documentation? We always keep the work order. Why? Because she had no right. She's not the owner. She lied to you. Long silence. Shit, I need a copy of that order. I'll email it, he said, but I'm going to need to talk to my lawyer now. 20 minutes later, the file hit my inbox. A fake-looking document with HOA headers, no signature, and a block of text about noncompliance. The kicker? The address listed as authorizing agent wasn't the HOA. It was Karen's personal email address. I forwarded it directly to Officer Malone. 15 minutes later, he called me back. Yeah, he said. That's enough. I'll be in touch. The next morning, Karen's white sedan wasn't in her driveway. By noon, she was back, and this time the smirk was gone. Karen marched across my lawn like she owned the zip code. She didn't knock, just stood at the base of my porch steps, arms crossed, waiting for me to come out. I did. You called the police again, she said, voice low but sharp. After everything I've done to make this neighborhood beautiful? You mean after you impersonated an HOA official, falsified documents, and stole private property? Her jaw clenched. That fence was non-compliant. I gave you multiple warnings. You gave me nothing, and the contractor you hired gave a statement, along with a forged document linked directly to your email. She stepped one stair closer. You really want to make this a legal matter? I sit on the board. You think you'll win? I smiled, just enough to show teeth. We'll let the court decide. She scoffed, turned on her heel, and stormed off, but not before muttering, people like you don't last long here. That night, I sat with Carla and my friend Sam, who'd helped me when I first got home, and we made a list. Not just what happened to me, what had happened to others. The woman 3 houses down? Karen reported her for planting a dwarf maple too close to the sidewalk, forced her to dig it up. The retired couple at the cul-de-sac, fined repeatedly for excessively loud wind chimes. A single mom 2 streets over, pressured to repaint her garage door twice because Karen didn't like the hue. These weren't rules. They were power trips. Carla connected me with another neighbor, Ron, ex-military, early 60s. Turns out Karen once forced him to move his mailbox 3 inches left because it was disrupting visual symmetry. I nearly sold the place after that, he told me, sipping whiskey on his porch. She wears people down. That's her game. The more I heard, the clearer the pattern became. She targeted people she didn't like, claimed they violated vague standards, and used HOA clout to push them out. She's flipped 5 houses in this neighborhood alone, Ron said, always after she discovers violations. I bet she's got buyers lined up before the harassment even starts. That hit me harder than I expected. You think that's what she's trying to do to me? I'd bet my pension. And then came the twist I didn't see coming. The contractor from Westside called me back. Hey, it's Pete. I was going through our files. You might want to know. Your fence panels? We never trashed them. What? She told us to drop them at her cousin's place on Candler Street. Said they'd reuse the materials? You're kidding. I wish I were. Guy was already cutting them down when we unloaded. Within an hour, I was on Candler Street, parked discreetly across from a 2-story bungalow with a fresh-looking side fence made of cedar panels. My cedar panels. The dimensions, the knots in the grain, they were identical. I took pictures from the sidewalk, called Malone. Can you prove the panels are yours, he asked. They have my house number etched in the back of the top plank. I did it when I repainted them. That'll do. He agreed to meet me the next morning. We went together, showed the photos, the receipts, the email trail, everything. By the time we left, I had a signed report stating the materials had likely been diverted without permission. And Karen? She'd now crossed a line big enough to justify full charges. Still, Malone warned me, she's not done. People like her don't back down. They escalate. He was right. The next evening, I got a violation notice in my mailbox. Again. This time, improper trash bin placement. The bin was in my garage. The day after that, uncut grass, hazard to neighborhood aesthetics. I'd mowed the lawn that morning. Then came the letter, certified mail, from Oak Pines Homeowners Association to Jackson Myers. Subject notice of formal hearing regarding continued noncompliance and neighborhood disruption. They were calling a meeting. About me. Karen was trying to flip the narrative, turn me into the problem, but she underestimated two things. I don't back down. I wasn't the only one she'd pushed too far. Ron, Carla, Sam, even the Chimes couple. They were ready. I called Malone. "Do you want to be present?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "I'll be there." The HOA meeting was set for Thursday evening, 6 p.m., in the community center. I showed up 15 minutes early with a manila folder under my arm, my phone fully charged, and Officer Malone standing beside me in uniform. Karen was already there, sitting at the long table with three other board members. She didn't even try to hide her surprise when she saw the officer. "Mr. Myers," she said, tone clipped, "this is a private community hearing. Law enforcement presence is unnecessary." "It's voluntary," Malone replied, "and I'm not here to interfere. Just observe. There's an open case regarding some of the issues on your agenda." Karen's eyes narrowed, but she didn't argue. Not out loud. The room filled quickly, way more people than I expected. Carla, Ron, the Windchime couple. Even folks I'd never met, some standing in the back because all the chairs were taken. Something had shifted. People were tired of being quiet. Karen opened the meeting with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "We're here tonight to address continued noncompliance by Mr. Myers," she said, projecting her voice. "Multiple violations, including unauthorized fence materials, improper lawn care, and disruptive behavior." I stood up slowly. "I'd like to respond." "You'll have 5 minutes," she said, already irritated. I walked to the front and held up the manila folder. "This isn't just about a fence," I began. "This is about how rules are applied, selectively, how personal vendettas are disguised as policy enforcement." I handed the folder to the other board members. Inside, photos of my original fence, timestamps included, the fake removal order with Karen's email from the contractor stating he was misled, photos of my fence materials reused elsewhere, a signed statement from Malone confirming my report. "I didn't break the rules," I said. "Karen did. She impersonated an HOA authority to remove private property. That's not just unethical, it's criminal, and I have documentation to prove it." A murmur spread through the room. Karen tried to cut in. "You're twisting." "Let him finish," said one of the board members, surprisingly firm. "I've also gathered testimonies," I continued, "from neighbors who've experienced the same treatment, fines for fabricated violations, pressure to change things that aren't even in the bylaws, threats for speaking out." I turned to the room. "Raise your hand if you've ever felt unfairly targeted by this HOA." More than half the hands went up. Karen's face turned white. "This isn't about community standards," I said. "It's about control and intimidation, and I'm done staying quiet." Malone stepped forward. "I can confirm that there's an active investigation into possible criminal misconduct related to property interference, falsified documentation, and misrepresentation of authority," he said. "Further charges may follow." Dead silence. Then from the back of the room, someone clapped. One person, then another, then more. Karen stood up, her voice shaking. "This is absurd. You all know I've served this community for over a decade. I've preserved its value, its standards." Ron spoke next, loud and clear. "Number, you've preserved your power at our expense." The board called an emergency vote. Karen objected. "You can't. There's protocol." But protocol didn't save her. They voted 4-1 to remove her from the board, effective immediately. Karen stood frozen, face blank, then turned, grabbed her purse, and walked out without a word. The room stayed quiet until the door closed. Then Carla whispered, "Holy hell, it actually happened." It did, but we weren't done. Not yet. Karen didn't go quietly. 2 days after the vote, I received a thick envelope in the mail, certified again. Inside was a cease and desist letter, drafted by some law office I'd never heard of, accusing me of slander, harassment, and intentional emotional distress inflicted upon a community leader. It was nonsense, pure bluster. I scanned it, sent it to my lawyer, and then pinned it on the fridge like a trophy. But the fallout was already rippling through the neighborhood. By Monday, someone had taken down Karen's neighborhood pride sign from the entrance gate. Her white SUV sat parked in her driveway, covered in pollen and dust, unmoved for 3 days. The curtain in her upstairs window stayed drawn shut. For a woman who used to walk the sidewalks like a self-appointed mayor, her silence was almost jarring. Then the news hit. An investigative piece aired on the local 6 o'clock broadcast. Homeowners say HOA president abused power for profit. They had interviews, blurred faces, altered voices, Ron's testimony, Carla's story, even the wind chime couple. They aired snippets from the HOA meeting, footage of the vote, and a brief quote from Officer Malone confirming an active investigation. Karen's name wasn't redacted. The next morning, 2 men in black windbreakers showed up at her house with clipboards, state licensing officials. By noon, word had spread. Her real estate license was under review. Her business website went offline the same day. And the fence? That was the best part. With the help of a few neighbors and a little petty creativity, we reinstalled it. Same panels, same measurements. Just one small difference. Carved into the wood on the street-facing corner, neatly burned in with a branding iron Ron had found in his shed, were 3 simple words: still standing, legally. We held a cookout the day it went up. Burgers, lemonade, folding chairs, music from someone's Bluetooth speaker. The neighborhood felt different, lighter, more human. Amanda, now acting HOA president, showed up midway through with new printouts, simplified guidelines, actual transparency measures, and a plan to involve more residents in future decisions. No more surprise fines, she said, and no more Karens with clipboards. Late that night, as I sat alone on the porch with a beer in hand, I saw Karen's porch light flicker on. She stepped outside barefoot, hair unkempt, stood there for a moment, staring at my fence. Maybe she saw the carving, maybe not. She turned around and went back in without a sound. I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly, just done. Weeks passed. Karen put her house on the market, quietly through a third-party agent. The listing vanished after a month, then reappeared at a lower price. Rumor was she'd moved into a condo across town. No lawn, no neighbors, just silence. And me? I got my peace back. The fence stood firm. The fake violations stopped. The HOA, under Amanda's watch, became what it was meant to be. A body that helped people, not controlled them. Sometimes I catch myself watching that corner of the lawn where it all started, the empty soil where my property met Karen's ambition. And I think about the moment I got off that plane, sunburned and happy, only to find a war waiting at my doorstep. But I fought back, not with fists or fury, with facts, with allies, with patience. And when it was all over, the message couldn't be clearer. You can rip down a fence, but you can't erase the line. Thanks for watching. And if you've ever dealt with a Karen like mine, drop your story in the comments. You're not alone, and you're not powerless. Not anymore.